So
Uh-huh.
now the federal government's in charge.
Right. So I bet the mayor is not happy at all.
Actually, she gave statement today that she was pretty accepting of it almost. So I
Really?
don't know if I don't know if she's heard enough complaints about the violence or the fear that people have,
Uh-huh.
but she agreed to cooperate, promised to cooperate with the federal government.
Well, that's a surprise, but this is good news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, let's start. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cheyenne's Forum. Today is August 12th. Welcome, my dear friend Tom.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so glad to see you. Um, Last time our podcast is at Friday. So Saturday, Sunday, and today. So
Yeah, so how much can happen in 2 days?
a lot. Actually, a
Really?
lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot, really. So we have lots of questions as usual. And before we start, I'd like to introduce our audience about Tom. Tom worked in FBI for 30 years. That's his career. And then he worked as assistant director of FBI for 5 years, and now he's retired. And once again, thank you so much, Tom, to
Welcome. Thank you.
share your experience, your insights of the current subjects. All right, so first thing first, President Trump is making Washington, D.C. great again. So this is a big news. Actually, President Trump will crack down on crime and clean up the street, which is really important. So he announced the whole of government effect to get the job down, including deployment, the National Guard. So this is a big news. And Tom lives in Washington, D.C. So I just like to ask you, what do you think about that? You happy about that? The Democrats happy about that? Are people there is waiting for that
I
action
don't know
for?
about the Democrats, but I'm very happy about it, and everybody I know is happy about it. And
Mhm.
especially, many of us don't live right in the city, but in the city are all the government offices, or most of them, and many of us had to commute in and out.
Right.
And for personnel that work at places like the FBI or at the Pentagon, many of them are coming and going from their workplace in the middle of the night, where it's really not safe to be on the streets of Washington at midnight or 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. But depending what was going on in the world and depending what the mission was of the agency you worked for,
Mhm.
it was very important to have it. So we've had federal employees, even White House employees, to be mugged, robbed, killed, leaving work in the middle of the night or coming to work in the middle of the night. And
Mhm.
especially in the wintertime where gets dark at 4:30 or 5,
Mhm.
it stays dark till 7 or 8 in the morning. In the summer we have more daylight, but in the winter you don't. And so you have darkness for more than half the day, and you have cold weather
Mhm.
where these gunmen can hide their guns under long, thick jackets. Where in the summertime, when it's warmer and people are wearing shorts and tank
Right.
tops and more flimsy attire, it's more difficult to conceal a weapon.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. So, in your memory, when Washington, D.C. start to get so violent, I think 30, 20 years ago is okay, right? Not too bad.
Now, I'll give you an example. When I was a supervisor in Chicago, I supervised an organized crime squad.
Mm-hmm.
And the squads were mainly assigned to different parts of the mafia in Chicago to use the RICO statute to investigate, prosecute, and incarcerate members of the mob. In
Right.
Chicago, they call it the outfit. Now, the RICO statute is designed to go after an organization where you
Mm-hmm.
have an organizational structure, a hierarchy, bosses and mid-level managers and soldiers on the street.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very well to use in organized crime because of an organization.
Right.
Now, what happened back in the 80s, Chicago, not just Chicago, but Washington, D.C. was starting to be overrun by street gangs. And so the FBI and Chicago police, I mean, Washington Metropolitan Police
Mhm.
entered into a cooperation and created task forces to use the RICO statute to go after street gangs in DC because they had an organization. They
Mhm.
had bosses, they had soldiers, they had people carrying out the task, earning money, and sending it up the chain to the bosses.
Mhm.
So, these task forces were created to use the RICO statute, to use federal law in
Mhm.
DC,
Mhm.
where the bulk of the leadership of the investigation came from the FBI. Now, this is back 40 years ago.
Mhm.
So, back in the 80s and 90s. So, it's not anything new to have violent crime in DC. It's just a little bit of a different nature. Now, what's different today, at the time, you had these gangs and
Mhm.
the gang, I remember one of the leading gangs was the J Street Gang in Washington.
Mhm.
And, the FBI had a lot to do with taking them apart, like it did with taking the mafia apart in the rest of the country,
Right.
various cities.
Mhm.
Now, the difference today is that much of the crime is being committed by teenagers, by juveniles.
Oh,
They're
in
not as
one.
well organized. And so using the RICO statute is not uh, as easily done as it
Right.
was 40 years ago.
Right. Right.
So now, what you need is just officers on the street, agents on the street, developing sources and going after these. But when you see 14, 15-year-old kids
Mhm.
committing murders like is happening now, that's a much more difficult thing than going after an organization like a
Right.
gang.
Right.
So that's the challenge today is you have violent crime and it is organized, but it's much harder to accomplish, to eliminate them as wild teenagers, disorganized teenagers on the street, and especially with the amount of young kids carrying guns, carrying
Right.
illegal weapons. And that adds to the difficulty because a lot of the shootings
Mhm.
that are happening now where people are being killed is based on these kids have guns
Mhm.
and no, they've learned that the criminal justice system won't punish them, won't really hurt them. So they
Mhm.
have no hesitation to use those guns to settle an argument or take out a rival or whatever. And
Right.
so I think that's a big difference now is that we have a level of crime where they go after people just walking down the street or
Mhm.
getting off a bus or a subway or whatever.
Mhm.
And we haven't had that in a long time in this city.
Right. Wow. Well, thank you for the information. That's very important. It's a big change from the organizational crime to the teenage. So, as a law enforcement for your life, what's your suggestion for this situation? Like a young kids, underage kids
Well,
get
one of the issues here in DC is the same issue we see across the country. In a blue city, DC is basically a blue city, even though it's not supposed to be
Mhm.
affiliated. That's why they don't want it to be a state. It's supposed to be the capital and under federal jurisdiction.
Mhm.
But you have, to me, the biggest problem is start with if the police make an arrest, then what happens? Person is back on the street in a matter of hours. So really, it's suffering from the same mismanagement as almost every other blue city in the country. The
Mhm.
same liberals, the same city council members that want to coddle criminals and give them probation and not support the police, put them back on the street, pick very liberal judges who aren't going to enforce it, let
Right.
the people back out.
Right.
And that's kind of something that's wrong with the whole country having very liberal judges being appointed that are just, from their ideology to me being wrong to just being stupid. If you look at the situation we just had recently, I think in Louisville, somebody gets sentenced to 20 years in prison, and the
Mhm.
liberal judge lets them out after about 3 years. Says, "Oh, okay, we're going to use shock probation." Well, yeah, that type of probation is a shock to the community, not
Right.
to the person. So
Exactly.
now, that person goes and commits a violent crime having just been in jail a short period of time. So I think that that's one of the biggest problems is you have so many liberals, especially liberal Democrats,
Mhm.
thinking that, oh, we just have to coddle these criminals. We just have to you know, treat them like babies or young kids or something, and not hold them accountable, not make them responsible, and that we're paying the price for it in these cities.
Hmm. So what do you think that President Trump would do
I
with
think, well, the
crime?
very beginning is to have enough people on the street, whether it's federal police assisting local police, being assisted by federal, even military, if
Mhm.
necessary, to reduce the amount of just violent crime in the first place,
Mhm.
reduce the number of crimes that are being committed against innocent citizens, and then go from there. When you arrest these people, get arrested, try and change the system to the point where they can be prosecuted and held accountable and not just be coddled and let out by liberal judges or a
Mhm.
liberal U.S. attorney's office. So now he's appointed Janine Pirro, who
Mhm.
had been a
Yes.
Fox commentator, but earlier in her career, she had been a judge in New York and a family court judge.
Mhm.
And she's obviously a conservative.
Mhm.
And she just held a big press conference today vowing to ensure prosecution of these individuals and to do what's possible to
Mhm.
try to change the court system enough
Mhm.
that even juveniles will be held accountable.
That's great. That's great. So we have a military or police, and we have a strong AD, which is a AG, which is so important. So important.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Along with a very strong
uh-huh.
prosecutor running the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I'm just a little curious about the teenage crime. Do we have a tough enough law to limit the crime? For example, a guy killed people, 16 years old. Normally, what are we going to do if we follow the law?
Well, it depends. In many of these cases, juveniles can be prosecuted and incarcerated like adults,
Okay.
especially when they're 14, 15, 16.
Uh-huh.
So it depends on the jurisdiction and what the authorities are there. But
Hmm.
I think that the police officers are well aware of what's going on, and this is the frustration for law enforcement, is that they do what they can to
Hmm.
arrest these individuals,
Hmm.
only to see them released almost immediately and back on the street.
Hmm.
And this has been a problem for many years, especially recently, and especially since we've had how many years of, 8 years of Obama, 4 years of Biden, where there was really no accountability for criminals. They weren't held accountable.
Yeah, right. So, more and more, I just think that for the lefties, they are not just have a kind heart, just try to be soft to the crime. I think they're intentionally to destroy the system,
I think so. I agree.
right? I don't think they're as stupid as that. How can you just forgive the crime in order to reduce the crime? It doesn't make any sense. So,
No, and to me, it's not just a matter of they have the wrong ideology or they're stupid. I think they're not that stupid. They're smart enough to know what they're doing and doing it on purpose,
yeah,
doing it to break down the system on purpose. And especially if you
mhm,
combine, Trump derangement syndrome that they want to bring down the Trump administration. Well, the best way to bring down Trump administration is to prevent him from keeping his promises.
mhm,
So during his campaign, he made no bones about being ashamed of Washington, about the graffiti, the crime, the lawlessness, all of that. And so now, like the first term that he had when he was president 45, they went out of their way to make sure that he couldn't accomplish anything he promised to accomplish.
right.
And now they're kind of doing it the same way
Yeah.
of let's keep him from being able to establish law and order or, return the cities to greatness,
Mhm.
especially the blue cities, or the Republicans to stop gerrymandering that the Democrats have done for years. All these different issues are coming up. And
Mhm.
much like the first presidency of Trump, where they made it that he had to spend so much time fighting with the
Yep.
Democrats and liberals, so much time in court, so much time when judges are issuing injunctions against his policies, and you can't do this and you can't do that. Um, so they're trying to replicate that to the extent they can.
Yeah,
Find
yeah.
out how many judges. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, that's one of the biggest damages done by Biden was the number of federal judges extremely limited, not picked by him, appointed by him, but picked by his liberal staff to
Hmm.
put these judges in place that are just absolutely
Hmm.
not willing to enforce or not in any way want to enforce the laws.
They're not even qualified as a judge. This is my
No.
opinion. Yeah. So these people are there not for serve American people, it's for destroying Trump. That's their only purpose. And for the action at Washington D.C., some people are criticized Trump, as always, said that the federal have no rights to occupy D.C. area. What do you think about that?
Okay, could you say that again? I'm not sure I
So
understood your
some people,
question.
yeah, some people just criticize Trump's action at D.C., said D.C. belongs to Washington D.C., not belongs to
Oh, I
the
see.
government. So,
Well, that's not true.
mhm,
DC is a federal district, belongs to all the people of the United States.
mhm,
It's supposed to be under the control of Congress. And
mhm,
they've kind of delegated that away to local elections in DC, which have elected all these liberal, pretty much useless politicians to run the district. And they've run it into the ground almost.
mhm.
So I think I think that the people don't want that. That's going to change. And Trump promised that he's going to do something, and he's keeping that promise right now.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. And how about the mayor of Washington, D.C.? What's her reaction on that?
Well, I was surprised. She gave a press conference today where she basically, maybe she realizes that, well, first of all, she could be removed easily
Hmm.
by the federal government. So she's not in a strong position like somebody elected to be mayor in Chicago or another big city, or like Mayor Bass in Los Angeles, which is another joke. But anyway, she basically sounded like she was going to be pretty compliant, maybe not quite welcoming the federal troops and welcoming Trump intervention, but accepting that she's going to have to get along with it. She's going to have to allow it and cooperate.
Well, that's good news to the
Well,
conservatives.
we'll see. I mean, they lie through their teeth, so we don't know for
Yeah,
sure.
that's a good point. So yeah, we'll see. We'll give about 1 week or two, then we can maybe see the difference. Um,
Right.
yeah, you're talking about the congressional map that Texas redistricting the congressional map. So the Democrats are very, very mad about that. They're not happy. And even Newsom, he threat President Trump said, you need to reply on this situation in 24 hours. Otherwise, I'm going to hold a press conference and I have a big announcement. They're very yeah, mad about that. So why they're so unhappy about that? Just because
Because they're the ones that created this. They've been doing the gerrymandering now for the last 10 or 20 years, and they've created these wild looking maps to try to connect, to get more of their voters
Mhm,
into congressional seats. If you look at Illinois, for example, where it's extremely obvious, you have a blue line through the center of the state um, that's very narrow, very long, and it was designed so that the most number of Democrats could win seats in the House. So they did that on purpose. So the Democrats have done all this damage, and then all these years, and now when the Republicans finally seem like they might be getting a backbone and wanting to do something about it, oh, they're screaming bloody murder. How can you do this? And, you know, tyranny and all the rest of it. And what they don't want is that the Republicans even just undo what they did in the last couple of terms.
mhm,
So it's pretty, when you look at the stats, when they put up stats for a state, multiple states that
mhm.
had 30, 40%, 50% voting for Trump, and then only have 0% to 5 or 10% of the congressional seats because of the way they've drawn the maps. It's clear. It's clear that what they've done is wrong, and now they're fighting like crazy, the stupid Democrats in Texas, to keep the Republicans from repairing it. The
Mhm.
damage they did, they don't want it fixed. They like it that way.
Yeah. Well, we should stop them at the first place. It's a lesson we need to learn.
Well, I think the government of Texas, Governor Abbott,
Mhm.
uh, they're trying to do that basically and using what levers they have. Now, they can remove these Democrats from office, and it's not a full-time job. They
Mhm.
can also take away their pay. Like they've done now is since they left the state, said you have to, we're not going to pay you by direct deposit anymore. You have to come to Texas and come to the courthouse, and
Mhm.
then we'll pay you by check here. And so we'll see how many of them. And
Come
it
back.
seems like most of them can probably do without the local Texas pay,
Right.
but they certainly need the seat. And so if Abbott gets them removed
Right.
and is able to put in Republicans to replace them, the
Well,
Democrats will have done more damage to themselves than anybody could have ever hoped for.
that's true. Well, actually, you just mentioned a very interesting number. You said in Illinois or somewhere in the blue state, Trump got 43% of the vote, but only got a few seats. So how
Right.
can that happen?
Well,
Um,
that's why they redraw the map. That's what the purpose of gerrymandering is to realign the district that lets them get more seats for their party, for the Democrats. So that's why you see the blue line in Illinois,
mhm,
and it looks like it goes across the state diagonally, very narrow, very long, and it was designed on purpose to add more Democratic seats and prevent the Republicans from getting majorities in their districts so they couldn't get elected.
so what is the normal procedure for mapping this congressional map?
I don't think there is one. And that's part of the problem is that constitutionally, the federal laws have been that the states are on their own and they can make their own election rules and requirements and do all of these things. And it's a local matter not to be controlled by the federal government. And now it's gotten to the point where the federal government is looking at this going, wait a minute, this has gone way too far
Mhm.
and we need to correct it. And so the Democrats are trying everything they can do to prevent the correction mechanism. And one of the correction mechanisms is to sit and hammer out new boundaries or whatever within that state. Now it's interesting. One of the leading Democratic consultants, Doug Schoen, he's been very outspoken in the last few days that the Democrats are doing tremendous damage to themselves
Mhm.
following this policy, leaving the state. They show that they're cowards. They don't want to stay in Austin and negotiate with the Republicans and fight it out based on who has what majority. And he has been extremely critical of this policy and that it's going to hurt them for years to come.
So he's
So
Democrat himself,
he's a
right?
Democratic consultant. So we will see. We'll see how that goes.
Okay, so yeah, basically you're right. The election and the congressional map is the state matter. It's not federal matter.
Right.
So yeah, so they have rights to redo or not redo. So it depends, depends on the state. So we'll see. I'm very curious about what Newsom gonna have. No, of course, President Trump won't reply to him, and then he said he's gonna have a conference. Well, I'd like to see what's his announcement. California be independent? It's impossible. So we don't know about that. And also, when we talk about the Democrats whistleblower, actually, he won't FBI that Adam Schiff he authorized the leading classified information to destroy Trump during the Russian hawks. And
Right.
also, Sowell also play a role in the leak. So my question is this, it is a time to issue a subpoena or start a formal criminal investigation to Adam Schiff?
I think they have. I think they have a formal investigation started on mortgage fraud. Uh,
Right, and then this is different, right? These are two different crime,
yeah,
right?
but it doesn't matter if mortgage fraud's a serious crime. And
Uh-huh.
so that's enough right there to go after him. But yeah, he's been perpetually lying from day one with the first Trump administration. He has seen the evidence of the Trump corroboration with the Russians. And the moderator, whether it's one of the Sunday morning talk shows, would say, "Oh, you've got that evidence. Show us." Well, not at this time, but I have it.
Yeah, I
And
remember
so
her.
he lied every day that he was a congressman in California. But that earns you brownie points in California with the Democratic voters saying, he's my kind of guy. Hates Trump, lies to implicate Trump in serious crime. Who cares? He's our guy. And they vote him into the Senate. What a what a disgrace for the
I,
for California.
yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. And I even don't know if people really vote for him like that. I don't know. The
Yeah, we
California
don't know.
election system is broken. I see that in my own eyes many times. So I'm not quite sure if, yeah, he has that much vote to keep him in the Senate. I don't know. So he has the fraud, and also he has authorized leaking the classified information. So for these crimes, how long he should stay in the jail? Let's just ask this question. What
Well,
this
if it
years,
was up to me,
no?
several years.
Several years. It's not that
Now,
long.
if you look at these allegations that he's made against Trump that were complete made up lies,
Mhm.
that alone should should be a couple of years in jail just for that, for the damage that does to our government, to our election system, to our rule of law, and how he could just violate that just so brazenly
Mhm.
with that evil look on his face all the time. You just want to slap him, frankly. I mean, I don't care. You
Yeah.
can't vote them out. The Democrats in California, they would vote in a mountain lion if they felt like it. So I think that here's Schiff getting elected in California to be a senator. If he wants to run for office, it should be maybe the head of his cell block in jail.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know. It just surprises me how long the American public, even Californians, even Democrats, can put up with this guy with all of his lying and all of the shenanigans that he's done. I can't believe they haven't turned on him by now.
Yep. Yeah. I totally understand what you mean. I have the same thought. I just cannot believe people vote him again and again and again, knowing that he's lying every single day. And also after he served, okay, let's say this scenario, after he served the sentence, come back from the jail, can he run the office again?
I would think they'll vote him back in.
Hmm.
If you look cross country and you see the ignorance of Democrats voting for some in New York.
Mhm.
you know, the socialist communist in New York that won the Democratic primary, uh, he's probably going to get elected mayor.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so.
Whoa.
He's got a huge lead over Como and Sliwa and the chief of police, former chief. So I think that he has a good chance, very
Wow.
good chance.
So welcome to communist in New York.
Absolutely.
That's scary because this guy is open Marxism and communism, and he's openly about that. He just not
Yeah, it's what's scary is that we have a very uneducated population in general, especially many of the immigrants that have come in. They have no clue. So they don't know the history of going back to Karl Marx writing his arguments, in London in the mid 19th century. So you take all of the things that Marx has been preaching and all of the places where that ideology won out, like in Russia, the Russian Revolution. So you have these communist countries that have just decimated their population, whether it's Mao in China, Stalin later following Lenin in Russia. Um, it's a tragedy. And yet the people, the people in the rest of the world looking at that go, that looks like a pretty good system. Or you take Venezuela, where they had one of the strongest economies in the Americas, in Latin America, Central America, South America. And look where they're at now with Maduro in office. Just completely run the economy of the country down.
Mhm.
And, and we had that here. We had Biden, you know, flaming idiot, bring our economy down with just 4 years. So, and do the people realize it? Do the people, in the US at least, it was enough to say, okay, we want Trump back in office. He's going to fix it. But if Trump wasn't so outspoken
Mhm.
and providing that kind of leadership,
Yeah,
then what? Who would have been elected?
right.
Kamala?
Cannot believe it.
No, I know.
Yeah. So, well, we'll see. I just don't expect that New York will go to the communist so soon, but maybe it's a reality.
It's a
And
good
people,
reality. It's a good possibility.
yeah, so people need to learn from their real life, not from the book, from the other people's experience.
Yeah.
So that's why history repeats itself. So probably we'll see that it happened in New York. And also talking about the Trump and Putin. After our podcast last Friday, they announced that they're going to meet this week
Yeah.
at Alaska. So that's a little surprise because lots of people thought they were going to meet at the third country. I didn't expect that Putin agreed to come to U.S. soil. So what's that mean? What do you think?
It could mean a lot of things.
Okay.
And, you listen to the different experts and they don't know. They're guessing that maybe it means Putin's ready to negotiate and dial down the war or or not. Or he'll meet Trump on Trump's soil and then basically repeat his demands. Now his continuing demand going back many years is Ukraine cannot join NATO.
Yeah, right.
And you have Zelensky saying they're going to.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have NATO, some of the idiots that run NATO uh, saying they'll take them. They'll take Ukraine, and they don't realize when they offer to do that, the ramifications or the consequences of what that means to Putin.
Mm-hmm.
That if NATO takes over, that means he's going to have NATO weaponry, which is predominantly going to be ours, right on the border with Russia. And that's a very short distance. So Russian missiles, I mean, NATO missiles can go from Ukraine to Moscow in about 10 minutes.
Right. Exactly.
And so, and if we look back to 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, that was our basis. We said, no, no, no. Russia cannot have, or the Soviet Union at the time, cannot have missiles in Cuba because they can land in Washington or New York or Chicago in about 30 minutes.
Mhm.
And we're not going to have it. And so we used the so-called Monroe Doctrine going back to the middle of the 19th century, saying European powers cannot gain power in our hemisphere, in North or South America. But in any event, Soviet Union tried to do that. And, luckily we were on the brink of World War III then, and luckily that was averted.
Mhm.
And in a lot of ways, what happened and the efforts by the Kennedy brothers, President Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, dealing directly with emissaries from the Soviet Union, meeting secretly in Washington, and setting up back channel communications with Khrushchev, that had a lot to do, many experts think, with the assassination of Kennedy. That he was working with Khrushchev, they agreed to do this together and that Kennedy was making speeches that maybe it's time to get along with the Soviet Union. Maybe it's time to have peace. Maybe it's time to negotiate nuclear arms reduction and all of this. And our neocons just thought that's treason. Members of the CIA and other agencies in the United States thought that John Kennedy's a traitor
Mm,
and he has to pay the price for it.
right.
So, and that could be it. That could have a lot to do with the fact that he negotiated the way he did with Khrushchev. At the time,
Mm,
uh, the Joint Chiefs of Staff and General Curtis LeMay, who was running the Air Force, they were telling Kennedy, attack,
mm,
invade Cuba. And Kennedy refused
mm,
and said, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to, the mighty United States is not going to invade, Cuba uh, and show us being that way in our own hemisphere, being a bully.
mm,
And so we wouldn't do it.
mm,
And again, a lot of people in our government just thought he's a coward and he's a traitor.
mm. What do you think? Do you think Kennedy make a right move?
Well, I think, yeah, the proof is in what the outcome was. That
Mhm,
we ended up, and he made back channel promises, for instance, that if you remove your missiles from Cuba,
mhm,
then we're not going to admit it now, but we have missiles in Turkey that are just as close to Moscow
mhm,
as Cuba was to Washington.
mhm,
So Kennedy promised we'll pull those out, but we're not going to admit it now. So Khrushchev allowed Kennedy to look like Kennedy out negotiated Khrushchev,
mhm,
even though he didn't. They kind of evenly decided to reduce their nuclear posture,
mhm,
affecting both countries.
mhm,
So I think that yeah, I think the history has shown, at least I believe, that Kennedy made the right choices, but a whole lot of people in our government didn't think so. Then he adds injury to insult by, saying we're going to pull out of Vietnam. Well,
mhm.
we only had 15,000 advisors in Vietnam at the time, and the people that control the neocon community then, the military and the contractors and all of that, they just saw dollar signs in Vietnam. If we put all these troops there and then we have to put uniforms on them and give them guns and equipment and airplanes and tanks and helicopters,
Oh,
what benefit to the U.S. economy if we can do that?
mhm,
Yeah, we lost 56,000 people killed over there, but we made a lot of money. And for the military industrial complex, that's what they were looking at. So when Kennedy says that he's going to have all of those advisors
mhm,
out of Vietnam by 1964, the end of 64, that was treason to them.
mhm.
So you have the CIA, you have the military, you have others thinking Kennedy's a traitor.
Maybe that's why Trump right now agreed to sell the weapon to UN, not UN, EU, and then EU sent the weapon to Ukraine, right?
Could be. Yeah, could be.
Yeah, so it's well, this is the attitude change from Trump's side because he wants to stop the war the first day of his entering the Oval Office, but the war's still going on, and I believe there are a huge force back in D.C. to just don't want to stop the war. So we'll see. And you're right. You said Putin, the first beginning of the war he requires the four area from Ukraine and also no NATO at Ukraine. That's it. He didn't change a bit up to
No,
today.
no,
So what?
that was his demand
Yeah,
back 2020 even. No
right.
NATO in Ukraine.
Right. So we'll see. And then some people think that this is a sign, but he agreed to come to Alaska, which is American, a sign to that negotiation maybe have a more like positive outcome.
Yeah,
Um,
it's an
did you
irony that Russia sold Alaska to the United States.
exactly,
And
exactly.
back the Secretary of State at the time, Seward, I think it was William Seward, and when we bought Alaska, he was mocked and it was referred to as Seward's folly.
Hmm.
Well, if they could see the way the world is now,
Hmm.
what a benefit to having Alaska, not just as a buffer with the eastern, with Siberia and the rest of the Russian continent, but the natural resources in Alaska and all of the benefits of that huge land.
right.
Uh, from between the Alaska purchase and the Louisiana purchase,
Mhm.
the United States benefited from acquiring a lot of land by by money, by law, by whatever, without having to conquer it. So
Right.
we didn't win a war to
Mhm.
win the states in the Midwest that ended up being the Louisiana Purchase, and we didn't fight a war to get Alaska.
Mhm.
So
It's another
we
way
did
to,
fight a war with Mexico to get Texas and Arizona and New Mexico
right.
and
Yeah.
all of that, but that's
Yeah.
another story.
It's another story, another way to get land without war. And also the last question, I just want to hear your opinion. Some people compare Ukraine versus Russia equals to Taiwan versus China. What do you think about this situation? Can they compare it with
I
each other?
don't I don't think so. I don't compare them that way, and especially because China has been talking about reuniting Taiwan with the mainland now for how many years?
Mhm.
And you never heard that before. You never heard Russian leaders, and now Putin's been there over 20 years. You never heard him before saying, you know what, we should take over Ukraine. He didn't want it. And he
Mhm.
said in the very beginning, he didn't want it. And he
Mhm.
said that, they're very closely related. And, Putin, a lot of people don't, I guess they don't believe him that he turned Christian and that he backs the Orthodox Christian Church of
Mhm.
Russia, which was born in the Ukraine. So
Yeah.
he's let it be known for many years now that he had no animosity against the Ukrainian people, considers them basically brothers, in a sense.
Mhm.
And so he was never, ever in favor of taking over Ukraine or destroying it. He's been the reason this war, I think, has taken so long is he's been very careful. The bombings and the attacks in Ukraine have been against their energy facilities or military, and all of the spectacular buildings in Kiev, he's left intact.
Mhm.
So he's gone out of his way to be protective of the Ukraine.
Mhm. Yeah. So not like China versus Taiwan. And China always, communist China always wants to take over Taiwan. And they always claim that Taiwan is a part of China.
Right.
And you never heard Putin said Ukraine is a part of Russia. So this is really different. Yeah, a good point. Thank you so much. Well, yeah, you just cannot imagine how many people here in a Chinese community, they just compare Ukraine and Taiwan. So that's the main reason for them to support Ukraine. And they thought if Ukraine fall, Taiwan will fall. If Russian take over Ukraine and China will take care of Taiwan because Putin has an example of taking the other country. So Xi Jinping, like Communist China, will follow. So according to your understanding, this is actually two different things. It's not the
Very
same.
different. Yeah, very different.
Well, thank you so much. That's a good point. Thank
Yeah,
you.
China, like you say, over the how many 40, 50 years has said Taiwan belongs to us, belongs to the mainland, should
Mhm.
not be separate. And that goes back to, you can go back to Chiang Kai-shek or whatever to see the differences or the warlike
Mhm.
attitude between the two. And
Mhm.
in the case of Russia and Ukraine, you never saw that.
Mhm. Exactly. It's a good point. Well, thank you so
And not
much.
only that, I should add one more point.
Sure.
When you say the Chinese community or people or friends of yours um, are comparing the two, don't forget where they're getting their facts from our mainstream media and
Mhm.
our leaders that hate Putin, that are very anti-Russian, and that any way they can blame Putin for anything that's going on, just like the way they blame Trump, that's what they do.
Mhm.
So Putin has never indicated that he wanted conquest and take over Ukraine. He didn't want it.
Mhm.
But he also said, but you're not putting NATO weapons on our border,
Mhm. Right,
period.
right. So do
And
you
also he's held back. He's had legal justification with the equipment going into Ukraine to basically fight back against all of the countries that are contributing to that, including the U.S. And he has the hypersonic missiles that could reach the U.S., could reach Washington and
Mhm.
London and Paris and Brussels and Warsaw.
Mhm.
And he would have been justified already in using those weapons
Mhm.
in the war against all these countries
Right.
because they have attacked him
Mhm.
and, supplied now the drones and the missiles and the anti-aircraft equipment. So he is technically, from a legal standpoint, laws of war, he's
Mhm.
well justified
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
retaliating against Europe and the US.
Mhm.
So far, he hasn't. So far, he's given NATO and the US countries every way out to
Mhm.
back out of this.
Mhm. Right. Exactly. So do you think there is a possibility, maybe it's just a little small possibility that America and Russia can reach some kind of cooperation after the Alaska meeting? Is
I
that
think so. And there are a number of pundits just knowing how Trump does business
mm-hmm.
that think that there's already been something negotiated between Russia, between Putin and Trump, that there's going to be some deal, whatever it might be, a land deal or an economic deal or manufacturing, something.
Kind of?
And a lot of people think there's going to be more to this meeting
Yeah,
than
right,
just shaking hands and saying, okay, we're going to stop using Ukraine to attack Russia.
right. So we'll
We'll
see.
see. Be
We'll see.
very interesting Friday to see what happens.
Yeah, and then we can talk about that next Tuesday.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so very much, Tom. It's a wonderful, wonderful podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too.
Thank you. So I'll see you. Oh, let me see if where's my phone? Okay. I'll check out if anybody have question that I can text you the question that I can answer our audience then.
Okay, sure.
Thank you so much. I'll see you next Tuesday then.
See you Tuesday.